So as some of you know, some of you don't, I'm graduating. So this is my last Speak Out event as president. And so to commemorate that, I decided that I wanted to do a reiteration of the first speech that I ever gave, which was in November of 2013. Because I've never actually told the story after that time. So I figured I would try it again. So the first speech that I ever gave began when I was 13. I met a boy. But thinking about it now, it all really began a lot earlier than that, because I was always a really shy and awkward kid, and I never really had a lot of friends at school. And in my early years of elementary school, I had a different friend every year. And so when I did start to make friends that carried through with me year to year, I was always the butt of their jokes, and if I, said something or stood up for myself in any way, it would start fights. That's upside down. And so the reason why I started that way in the first place, and I said that why it changed things, was because, when I met him, everyone made fun of him too. And although I had learned to kind of laugh along with my friends and kind of just accept that as part of life, I didn't want him being treated that way, and so I felt very protective of him. It only grew over the years until I grew into love. And when we started dating in the 10th grade, our friends were furious and basically disowned me. And for a while, I was limited to catty comments whenever we were together in public, judging my behavior, talking behind my back and stuff like that. And I still don't know why they were doing this, because they would say things to me like, oh, we just want to avoid drama, but there they were starting drama themselves. So since then I thought, maybe they were jealous, maybe they just didn't like me, maybe they thought I wasn't good enough for him. I really don't know. I've sort of given up on trying to rationalize their behavior. But meanwhile, I knew that he was dealing with depression and self-harm, and I also knew that I was the only one that he would talk to about this. And I didn't fully understand self-harm back then, and I spent many weeks thinking that, he could die at any possible moment. So talk about pressure. And I was trying to get him help and, quote unquote, save him. And I was also trying to calm his worries over the growing tensions amongst our friend group, because he was the type of person who wanted to make everyone happy all the time, and our friends' negativity really upset him. And eventually the social pressure got too much for him, and he broke up with me. And afterwards he felt he could no longer stay friends with me, and then the next, suddenly I was completely isolated. And many people who were bullied in high school have similar stories to share, hearing whispers about themselves, being friendless in classes, and crying in bathroom stalls and the like. And sadly I was no exception. I didn't want to talk things out or, fight back against my former friends because I felt vulnerable and weak. I became paranoid that all my peers were out to get me or knew things about me, and social media became a nightmare, trying to block people who would use my profile to spread gossip. And all the while, I could see a decrease in my popularity reflected back at me in a tangible way, with dwindling friend numbers and comments on my wall and photos and stuff like that. And over time, I started to feel worthless because of my social rejection, because I would see others with loving friends and significant others, and I thought that because I no longer had those things, then there must be something wrong with me. And out of this period grew my already present but subdued anxiety and depression. I didn't know that I had it, but looking back now, it's easy to see that it was there the whole time, starting from childhood, under the surface. School was always a fearful experience for me, and now my grades started slipping. I could spend entire weekends in pajamas, and my teenage life started passing me by without me really experiencing it. So fast forward a couple of years, I graduated and entered university, and I thought that things might get better there, but they did not. I started out at Brock University, and I had no better luck. I had difficulty fitting in or knowing what to do at parties, because how could I when I'd never been invited to one? I missed out on so much in high school that I was a couple of years behind everyone else in terms of what I call social knowledge and experience. So, I could spend like a week without talking to anyone or even coming out of my room other than to go to classes, which even then I only did that about half the time. So I was very, very lonely, and eventually this led to me reconnecting with my old high school friends. And they offered me hollow apologies for their past actions, but they got upset if I used the word bullying to describe my experience. And I didn't totally buy it, but I accepted their apologies anyway because of my loneliness. And I still cared about them, and I've always believed that people can truly change if they want. Similar situation happened again. This was 4 years after the original time. So after being cut out again 4 years later, the same feelings came crashing down on me again, but worse this time, because now that it happened twice, like now it was really my own fault. And I thought, I should have known better. I was almost 21 at the time, and it was clear to me that this was no case of, typical high school bullying. This was just the reality of my life. People tend to assume that if you're bullied in high school, it's a pretty normal thing, and it's not going to follow you for the rest of your life. And, it gets better and all that. And, I'm not saying that that's not true, because of course it gets better. But they're lying if they say that it's not going to follow you or affect you in some way later on in life. Everything I went through in high school changed me forever as a person. Now I don't trust people as easily, particularly guys, and I have a very hard time relating to others my age and making friends. The same things that happened to me then often still happen to me now in small ways. I often feel excluded at work or in class and so on. I wondered if anyone would ever really care about me, or if I was just doomed to repeat this disappointing cycle forever. I felt like there was a fence between me and the rest of the world. I kind of always compared myself to Ariel in The Little Mermaid, because I desperately wanted to be on the other side of that metaphorical fence and be part of their world. And there were a lot of times that I couldn't recall the positive qualities about myself, but at others, it was all that I could think about, but instead of comforting me, it made me even more upset. A lot of people think that if you suffer from depression, you must hate yourself. And for a lot of people, that's true. And some days it's true for me as well. But by and large, I quite like myself. I think I'm a great person. I'm a nice person. I don't go out of my way to do mean things to people. And I was so angry at how the world had treated me that it made me feel hopeless, because I felt like it would never change. And all my life, having good friends and finding love had been my primary goal. And to have brief glimpses of that, only to have it taken away again, was exhausting. And eventually I came to the conclusion, if I can't have those things, then I don't see a good reason to live anymore. So I started seeing a therapist, and I soldiered on for several more months, but I was getting progressively worse. And that boy, who I met when I was 13, my best friend, started distancing himself from me, and that only made it worse. I would suffer from panic attacks when something bad happened in our relationship, and I discovered something new about our relationship that I hadn't wanted to admit to myself before. So I became suicidal, and one day in February 2014, I decided that maybe it was time for me to use my last resort and go to the hospital. So I did, and after a couple of hours in the ER in the middle of the night, they let me go. Now, I said no, because that was the truth. I was distracted by all the things that were happening around me, but that didn't mean that the feeling wasn't going to come back as soon as I left. So I believe that I made the wrong choice, but it still jump-started my path to recovery, because my visit to the hospital caused CAPS to move me to the top of their waiting list when I told them about it. And I started seeing a psychiatrist here and began taking medication. Now, obviously, medication is not the right choice for everyone, but I tried therapy before and got nowhere. So although I was reluctant, I decided I had to give it a shot. I was afraid that it was going to turn me into something or someone other that I'm not, but all it did was give me more energy and make me a better version of myself. I was very lucky to find a medication that works for me, and even luckier that it was the first one that I tried. Many people have to go through a few to find the right one, or might find that none are right for them at all. I don't necessarily recommend medication. I would always probably say, try everything else first, which is what I did. But I'm really happy that I found a solution. And I also found out that I have a specific type of depression called dysthymia. Dysthymia is a low-grade chronic depression that persists over many years. One of the hallmark features of dysthymia is that it's so subtle and insidious that people who have it don't always know that there's something different about them. And they believe that that's just the way that their life is. And that was the case with me. But looking back, I can now see that before I started taking the medication, most of my days seemed gray and gloomy, except for the happiest times, and I was a lot less productive than I am now. So, my personal life is still kind of a disaster. Shortly after I began taking my medication, what I considered to be my worst nightmare came. So even though I know how ridiculous that sounds to other people, I was convinced that he was the love of my life, and suddenly. He'd been in my life for 9 years, and all of my hopes and dreams were tied up in him. Every time I thought about starting a family or getting married, it was with him. And so without him in the picture, I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. It was almost like I didn't know who I was. But I never fell as far back into my old thought patterns as I used to be. Because although my personal life is a disaster, and it's still kind of a disaster, the difference now is that after getting through the worst, I now know that I have it in me to get through anything if I want to. And so now I no longer feel worthless because of the fact that, my personal life isn't always full of ponies and rainbows and sunshine like other people seem to be from the outside. I have so many other reasons to live, not least of which is this group. My boyfriend self-harmed in high school, stayed with me over the years, and I never stopped feeling responsible. And now it's entirely recovered, but that situation gave me something to care about. And I needed that because I was never passionate about anything growing up, except for this one guy. And so for him, I wanted to make sure that no one else felt alone. And I wanted to feel less alone too. So that was why I came to Active Minds in October 2013. And although I'm sad to be leaving the group and U of T in general, it's springboarded my career because of you guys. I had an opportunity to share my story for the very first time. And because I did that, I now have a full-time job in my field beginning immediately after graduation, which, not a whole lot of people can say that. So that's all to say that I can't thank you enough for the opportunities that you all have given me, and I hope that we've been able to do that for you, and will continue to do that for people at U of T, whether I'm here or not.